Hey everyone, today we're going to explore another very terrible situation if you wish to. Please be sure to support my channel, stay active and subscribe, it really aids me. I would be quite appreciative of that. Let's begin. A creative and carefully thought out plan frequently appears perfect on paper. But when the time comes to implement the strategy, innumerable unanticipated difficulties, obstacles, and ignored facts often reveal what effectively conceals its facial shortcoming, but is frequently the unreasonable inconsistency choices and remarkably subpar judgment of those concerned. The narrative of Shahraban, an Iraqi immigrant, is a terrifying illustration of how an unbridled thirst for vengeance can turn into something dreadful, and her yearning to settle is painfully illogical. Her ex-husband's score muddled. She was completely absorbed by her judgment and finally caused the complete disintegration of her identity, which is what makes this situation. What's particularly tragic is that the sole victim in the whole circumstance was a gullible young lady who put too much trust in Shahraban. Was born in a tiny town on April 30th, 1999. Iraqi village into a modest, conventional household when she was 6 years old. The family was relocated to Germany by their parents, relocating to the English city where Shahraban eventually enrolled her in school. Parents were devout and demanding, making a concerted effort to teach their daughter the customs of their homeland. However, Shahraban was raised in a one world where she swiftly took in her culture and way of thinking. Shaban, a new country even at an early age, displayed indications of having a strong will. Strongly independent and stubborn, she disliked frequently being told what to do, did not do what was anticipated, and desired to escape from traditional norms to live as a contemporary independent young lady, whilst she dreamed of building while she was still in school. A profession in the beauty business with the goal of to gain popularity as a PO stylist, and she spent hours as a beauty influencer. Viewing online makeup tutorials and spent her entire allowance to purchase cosmetics, she was persuaded she would eventually start her own beauty parlor, may even start her own line of cosmetics. Yet in order to achieve her objectives, Shahraban frequently used emotional outbursts, manipulative strategies, and using the victim card in some kind. At 15, she met someone who always got what she wanted. A 17-year-old man called Ruin was at the similar to how Shahraban Ruin first had relocated to Germany from Iraq. When he was quite little, his family shared many similarities, and their relationship swiftly developed into a romance relationship. Both of them were familiar with their families, wouldn't accept their partnership. Thus, they met in silence and kept it a secret. Remote locations throughout the city. But when Shahraban's cousin incidentally spotted the pair, rather than reporting them to, he attempted to blackmail her parents. Into a very inappropriate. Shahraban wouldn't put up with that sort of. She went directly to her for therapy. Parents and filled them in on everything regarding the connection, and the dangers posed by her parents were taken aback by her relative. Both revelations. Nevertheless, Shahraban was aware of the cousin no longer had any influence over her, as she was prepared to handle the remainder. Her parents forbade her on her own terms from observing Ruin, but she disregarded the prohibition and continued having covert meetings with him. Family disputes increased in frequency, although Shahraban remained steadfast in her choice. When she became 18, she and Ruin made their official relationship and received married, after which she stopped communicating. Spent more than a year with her parents. Both Ruin and Shahraban were driven and ambitious, through aspirations for a better life together. They established a tiny hair salon, where Shahraban worked as a skincare and makeup artist. The specialist business was doing well, and gradually growing, and it began to bring in a stable income. It appeared that dreams were within reach. Wonderful future that lies ahead, but that hope soon began to fall apart. Marriage wasn't genuinely joyful, till the Shahraban's personality in the first year, incredibly envious, irritable, and extremely reactive, started to take over the relationship. That began with disagreements behind closed doors, quickly became confrontations in public, and her outbursts were no longer confined to their house. In the open drawing, they spilt out. Wherever they traveled, Shahraban's jealousy had no limits, and she was wary of almost all the women, and her spouse occasionally spoke with her. Emotions erupted so fiercely that she even snapped at customers. If she believed that they were being too amiable enough to destroy, this type of aggressive conduct negatively impacted their family, company, But she was more than rationalizing a marriage that has previously existed, gradually transformed into an ongoing cycle of one-day turmoil and emotional outbursts. At the cafe, Sharaban created a commotion, where a couple typically ate lunch. She lost throughout their work breaks. Control when hurling an argument. Anything that may have destroyed one of her hurls struck a desert directly on the table, and those seated close to that. Their public outcry led to their exclusion from the institution, as the proprietor explicitly stated. Due to the incident, they were no longer welcome. Created a stir in their neighborhood and turned into a popular subject among friends and neighbors alike. But the focus and public outcry was ineffective in stopping the conduct of Sharaban. In fact, her encounters with Ruin transformed what started out as disagreements into physical altercations and destruction. Unwilling or incapable of taking revenge, turned into still the one bearing the brunt of it. Divorce was never mentioned in an odd way. Sufficiently, it appeared that they were both simply accepted everything. In 2020, when the pandemic struck, lockdowns were implemented. Location where the pair ended up restricted to the same area every day in, day out. Strangely enough, the imposed closeness resulted in a brief reconciliation. They were able to reconstruct some relationship, as well as by the following. When the limits relaxed that year, they leaped, resuming operations with renewed energy. Things appeared to be improving, and Shaban gave herself a treat in 2021. Sleek, new Mercedes-Benz in black, having her own vehicle provided her with a new freedom to come and go as she pleased, as she liked, without providing an explanation. Herself to anybody, her self-assurance transformed. Brave, almost stubborn, she began going out to clubs and other hotspots for nightlife and meeting new people. These interactions, particularly with men, were frequently brief casual liaisons or the sporadic two-date affair. In the end, among these flings, one became, in the middle of her whirlwind, something more. The lifestyle Sharaban got to know Jacob. What started out as just another casual romance swiftly became a passionate relationship. In spite of publicly leaving on Ruan, she continued to monitor his actions, looking through his phone and accusing him of even following him on social media and cheating, on which her relationship with Jacob deepened more powerful, and for a while she actually thought of abandoning her marriage for him. Suddenly, Sharaban discovered that she was expecting. She was certain who the father was, and he told right away. Destroy not just the pregnancy, but moreover, she was abandoning him for her. He realized that his new partner's ruin was crushed. Their marriage was irreparably damaged. However, the humiliation in public was, as for Sharaban, things became intolerable. Turn that she hadn't expected Jacob to catch surprised to learn she was pregnant. He wasn't prepared to have children, and that confusion prevented marriage from being discussed, and discovered herself emotionally overpowered. Herself. When Ruin's family was isolated, saw an opening and took action. Put a lot of pressure on her and eventually persuaded her to stop the unexpected. Everyone could see that she was pregnant. Surrounding them, the partnership was disintegrating. But neither the city nor Ruin hurried to declare that they kept residing under the same roof. Even as their growing hostility deep, the Sharaban was intolerable. Bitterness towards more than only her spouse but also towards his relatives, particularly following their coercion to terminate the pregnant one day. During an unadulterated fury, she barged inside Ruin's house, brother, and struck out, attacking them both. The stun of the brother and his wife, gadget that is terrifying and generating mayhem, their girls and sons. It was a pivotal moment that was impossible to overlook. After a number of other encounters that became violent, Ruin ultimately filed a lawsuit. Action. He requested a divorce and was granted a court ruling that prohibits Sharaban from approaching him or his relatives. But there remained the issue of the legal business they had established, together registered under the name of Ruan, and he lacked desire to close the salon with the marriage ended. Sharaban was unable to enter the salon. The court would now make its final decision. Destiny of the majority of Ruin's friends and family supported him. Isolating Sharaban and resentful, she took a rental flat. Flat distanced itself from society and started creating a risky strategy for. She believed that retaliation was the only way to retaliate. She pretended to die and accuse her former spouse of doing the crime. If all went well, the Ruin would be sent to jail, and she would vanish without a trace. From everything, she needed someone to help her make the plan work. Particularly, a young lady whose appearance may be mistaken for her own. A terrifying thought, and although it sounded ridiculous, Sherbin came up to it with frightening resolve. She started looking through social media and scanning one profile after another, gathering data analysis of images and making a short list of possible goals. She eventually discovered someone who matched the ideal age for a 23-year-old Khadija. A waitress Shahraban discovered via social media Khadija has spent her childhood in foster care. This implied there probably weren't any close family members to voice concerns, correct? Like Sharab Khadija, who was originating from Pakistan, she is an immigrant. Had relocated to Germany when she was a small child. With her dad, although he was subsequently imprisoned, and she was put in a group home, in spite of the difficulties of growing up in a strange nation by herself, Khadija stayed upbeat and gregarious. She envisioned herself breaking into in the entertainment sector whether it's on TV or in cinema. She often attended casting auditions. Shahraban noticed that during calls and talent performances, desire is the ideal opportunity for her to plan. After verifying each one, Shahraban was certain that she had discovered that Khadija was the perfect person for the same height, had a comparable physique, and their features were remarkably even. Their sense of style was similar. Almost the same in reality. In April, they might have easily passed for sisters. Sherbin made a phony account on a well-known social media site masquerading as she created the profile as a talent scout. When examined closely, it appeared to be a genuine gain. Followers and often shared content regarding opportunities for casting and auditions. Everything appeared genuine, and by mid-June, she contacted her intended target while pretending to be a director of casting for a famous German Shahraban, a rapper, sent Khadija a note asserting that she was chosen for inviting her to participate in a music video shoot. Khadija was excited to go to an audition. She said yes right away and was all ready. As she dreams about her big break, she coincidentally admired the artwork and chose to send him a direct message to show her enthusiasm and request a few details, at which point she discovered that there was no casting, and the shoot was scheduled. Was being placed, Khadija soon realized. She had been deceived by someone, yet she couldn't comprehend why somebody would visit such lengths or the reason. She left after blocking the phony profile. The city is rushing to develop a new strategy, one that was unable to fail over the next 2 months. She meticulously created. This time, it's another phony identity. Pretending to be the proprietor of a new beauty parlor, she contacted Khadija yet more. This time providing a free beauty services as a component of an advertising campaign for the salon's big. Sherbin's only request was to open permission to shoot pictures in exchange, then take a video of the hair and cosmetics. Khadija is not seeing anything during the styling procedure. Suspicious acknowledged that there was just one annoyance. The salon was situated traveling across town, and it wasn't simple for her, but the proprietor of the salon pledged to personally pick her up, and after the appointment, drop her off, once more. Sherbin took care to leave no one checking the details. She started to observe Khadija, and even received the same. She changed the color of her hair and got a haircut, just enough to fit flawlessly. By the time when the day arrived, the two had nearly similar hairstyles. To create the scheme, she took extra precautions to be sure. Approximately 1 month prior to the encounter, Sherbin returned to live with her parents at their request. For pardon, and acting as though you desire to reunite with her parents, who were not aware of her intentions, greeted her house with open arms in the twisted plan of Sherbin. They were supposed to be the ones to find out the body, and incorrectly recognize it as Shahraban, their daughter, set up a meeting. Khadija, during the evening of August 16th, she requested that she dress in a dark blue gown, one she'd noticed in a picture on Kad's Sharan, had previously purchased social media the identical gown for herself, and made care to put it on multiple occasions in that day in front of her parents, so they would vividly recall what she was wearing. Sherbin said, before departing the house. She was scheduled to meet with her relatives, her former spouse, to discuss settling the commercial affairs that are not in court. She seemed to be anxious, and claimed to be concerned about how the discussion would. As she departed, she pledged to return by that night, and requested that they wish her luck following her departure from her parents' house. Getting into her black Mercedes, Sherbin around 5 p.m., we drove away. When mom attempted to check in via calling, Sherbin's phone immediately went to the family first, didn't leave a voicemail. Panic. But throughout the course of the hours, there was remained silent when her worry started to develop when her parents passed away at night. Couldn't wait much longer. They made the decision to go find her on their own, and made their way to the area where previously their son-in-law resided on their manor, in which they saw Sherbin's Mercedes. It was left on the side of the road. It was obvious that she would not simply leave her car like that. Was obviously incorrect. The vehicle was colored. Windows that make it hard to view within the shadows, but via the windscreen, a figure could be seen. In the rear seat, they are still. Attempts to open the doors were unsuccessful, scared and locked, so they dialed the police and asked for emergency medical assistance. Officers unlocked the door when they arrived. Car, and what they discovered. Within was chilling. The dead body of a young woman was stretched out on the rear seat. Later, encircled by a puddle of blood, forensic analysis showed more than 50 wounds from stabs, many of which were aimed towards the chest, neck, and face. There was no denying the attack's savagery. The person who did this didn't intend to, allowing the sufferer to live despite that the victim's face was severely deformed. Acknowledgement of Sherbin's parents. The body. She was their daughter, wearing her dark blue dress from before. Took her ID in her purse and left the house. Her jewelry was lying close by inside, remained on her wrist. The word of the horrible crime nearly swept the town. Instantly. Particularly given that the vehicle had discovered in the region where Sharab had previously resided with her spouse. Naturally, he was the target of suspicion. Authorities were informed by her parents that she was on her method of meeting with her ex to talk about business-related issues, and never came back. A body had been discovered in her car. Police inside acted swiftly to bring Ruin for interrogation, but by the time when they arrived at his house, he had left. Understanding the circumstances could indicate he had disappeared completely this time. His absence simply made him appear more suspicious. Following their split, the business conflict had been messy, became unsightly, and affection was lost. He had a motivation between them. And now, a reason to run still, it seems. Something wasn't quite right. Even though identification officers for parents had residual uncertainties, the victim was discovered in Sherbin's automobile while she's dressed and bringing her ID. But the severe harm to the face seems deliberate, perhaps intended to stop appropriate recognition, followed by still another twist. The day following the finding, a woman, Samira, who came forward to submit as she reported her pal as missing, and Kadia, a co-worker, hadn't arrived for work. Wasn't returning texts or calls, and had not been observed since the last. Authorities began a search in the evening, and were astounded by how vividly looked like Sharaban's DNA analysis. Validated what investigators had previously started to have doubts about. The body discovered in the vehicle wasn't Sherbin's, but instead to Khadijah, the missing waitress. The confirmation altered everything to make things got worse when more evidence emerged, indicating that a recent post was made by someone wanting to employ someone online for $30,000 is being offered for the position. That discovered that Shaban and her new Shia's lover, had tried to locate a person to perform the ACT, but ultimately determined they could manage it themselves. Their strategy, at least conceptually, was a straightforward phase of a violent crime scene. Send him to Sherbin's ex-husband, jail. But what transpired after the pair obviously hadn't planned that far in advance. The scheme's utter irresponsibility shocked investigators, even though she was a fake. Sherbin didn't even attempt to lay low, but she and Shia went on, going about their daily lives in the same city where they were well known to everyone. Choice would end up being their downfall. 2 days later, Sherbin was taken into custody. The offense when she entered a cafe for a lunch that a number of patrons recognized her right away and informed the law enforcement upon the arrival of cops and brought her into jail. She promptly provided boost Shia's position in an effort to move. He is solely responsible for the two who had previously planned a calculating and cold conduct. They were now hurling each other together beneath the bus for all the careful they had worked hard on the planning. When questioned, their justifications broke down. Regarding the fallout, if everything had gone as planned, if Sherbin had been formally pronounced dead and destroyed, what did she do after being imprisoned? Remain in the same community where individuals can acknowledge her and ask where she might obtain new recognition, as well as with media attention of the nationwide case. It would be impossible for her to vanish. Anywhere in Europe or even Germany, their financial predicament made matters worse. Either they only had the meager quantity the funds that Sherban had taken out of her own account prior to the ACT's staging, they had abandoned the vehicle with Cad's body inside, thinking it would add legitimacy to the fraud. Yet they had failed to notice an important element. Declared dead, Sherban would no longer had any legitimate claim to the company that she shared with the ruin. But they hadn't thought that investing in initiators could and might make use of dental records or DNA fingerprints to verify the identity of a victim. Once in captivity, their identity relationship swiftly caused the affection to fade. It formerly united the two, but now it were all Shia for their own sake. Stated that Sherban was the brains behind every detail was planned, and did everything alone. He simply provided assistance. She later vanished. But Sherban's version presented a very different image. She claimed that Shia made the decision. To complete the act at the time she had cancelled at the last minute, exactly on a range for a stylish black Mercedes-Benz. Parked in front of the structure where Sherban, who lived in Qadia, introduced herself as the proprietor of the salon, and Shia performed the Qadia sensed that part of her personal driver, uncomfortable, even surprised by how much she and the owner appeared similar. But they weren't simply, they resembled twins in appearance and were clothed almost the same. Sensing her, Sherban swiftly tossed it aside in discomfort. Off asserting that it was merely a plan for the salon's branding future advancement, after the trio of while they were in the vehicle, Sherban pretended to if they insisted on being late, Shia drove them away when they took a shortcut. The main street into an empty, undeveloped region there, and he abruptly stated that their tire was flat and that they required to exit the vehicle so he could make repairs. Qadia attacked as soon as he left the house, stabbed repeatedly with a knife in the way. He continued to move his neck, face, and chest until after that, her face was completely different. Shia put the body in the attack. Back seat was replaced with a fresh pair of clothing that he had taken with him and returned to the vehicle's driver's seat. With tinted windows, it was practically impossible to peek inside, ensuring the pair wasn't concerned about being seen. They fled the region close to Ruin's house. Vehicle parked carelessly by the side of the road and left without worrying about being observed or acknowledged that they checked into a hotel located elsewhere in the city and continued as though nothing had occurred while visiting public areas and going about their daily business as usual. The trial that ensued would shock the nation upon the discovery of the crime. Ruin went into hiding and didn't come out the spotlight for more than a year. While the investigation progressed, he illustrated how, even following he was exonerated of suspicion by officials. Despite being behind, they were afraid of the Sherban. Bars would always find a way to retaliate him, and it appears that he had a nice cause for concern. Both Shia and Sherban were detained. Purportedly attempted to make further arrangements assaults by employing people in prison contacts in an attempt to silence possible. Fortunately, witnesses did not see any of those attempts were successful throughout the trial. Two turned against one another, each asserting the mastermind was the other, and neither expressed regret for what had transpired. One, Allen, a witness, stated in his testimony that initially he had replied to an online advertisement offering to pay for an assault following getting an advance of $5,000. He just took the cash and disappeared after. This fraud that Shia and Sherban allegedly made the decision to execute the criminal's dread of the police may find him and accuse him of. Allen went to the police, willingly and freely admitted all. What puzzled investigators all along? The case involved a total absence of reasoning. It was evident behind the plan that retaliation was Sherban's main motivation against her former spouse, but nobody was able to reconcile what she believed would occur subsequent to the staging of a violent. She committed a crime and staged her own demise. She didn't try to disguise and remained the same. City continued living her normal life and lacked a long-term survival strategy, or she hadn't even thought about how to get out. She would provide for herself financially. In the future, Sherban defense lawyers mostly relied on these shortcomings in the plan, claiming that her goals were confused, the lack of motivation, and that she would never have done that. Without the impact of Shia, they asserted that he was the one who took action into his own hands after being seduced by the assurance substantial monetary benefit, but the court did not purchase it in December. In 2024, Sherbin and her partner were convicted of a vicious planned offense carried out in tandem with one another. They received a life sentence in incarceration without the chance of release. I appreciate you everyone watching. I really appreciate your support, and you can hit that to help my channel grow. Like button, leaving a remark, and share this video to show your interest makes a big difference. I'll see you shortly.